At least 3 or 4 times a week, I think about how blessed we are here in the United States of America to have such a tremendous variety to choose from in terms of roller coasters and theme parks and ways to be able to spend our money and our time. Um, but, as we look at some of these amazing rides that we have throughout the country, you start to think about their origin story. Where did they come from? Who designed them? Who built them? And, I don't know about you, but after playing around on RCDB for a few hours, um, you start to, I don't know, on occasion, go down a little wormhole. I made that mistake, and I started really doing some homework and research about the folks that built the rides all throughout this country. Not just the people that designed them, but the people that drove spikes and nails and um, did welding and, you know, all the phenomenal stuff that it takes to be able to produce these amazing high quality rides. And, we are blessed. We are lucky in this country to have so many of them, like I said, to choose from. I think it is incredibly important that we try to keep a little bit of perspective and we understand what makes this industry great. And that is the combination of new and old. New technology, new innovation, new engineering, but also the classics. And being able to maintain them and being able to have a design that is built for longevity. Some designs are classic for a reason. It's because everyone keeps wanting to come back for more. And those are the rides that I want to look at. Those are the people that I want to look at. The people that put the time, the love, the sweat, the tears to give us such amazing high quality entertainment. I am Clay with the Pennsylvania Roller Coaster Club, and I think it's only fitting that since I'm on this kick, why don't we take a look at the 25 most influential designers and builders in roller coaster history? And in history, I think you have to look at the past, the present, and what's going to be in the future. So we're going to get it kicked off at number 25 with Joe Draves. Now, Joe very easily could already be higher on this list, but I'll be honest, he is still fairly young and he has quite a bit left to do in this industry, even though, his first 10 to 15 years of actually working as a lead designer is pretty darn impressive. With a catalog of hits already including Airy Force 1, Gale Force, Lightning Run, Max Force, Steel Curtain, and Wildcat's Revenge. And as long as Joe keeps doing work with RMC, I don't necessarily see him, putting out too many bad ones in the future. But, you never know. I think it is important, though, for Joe to put in a little bit more work to move up this ranking list. Going with number 24, Frederick Church. Now, Frederick Church, interesting because he didn't build a ton of roller coasters, but he did build some pretty influential ones. And there are three that are still operating to this very day, which would be Dragon Coaster at Rye Playland, very fun ride. Big Dipper at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, and then Big Dipper at Belmont Park in the San Diego area. All very good rides. And Frederick Church, he is the guy that made those happen. And, there is a little bit of criticism that both of the Big Dippers are, for lack of better terms, they have a lot of similarities to the Coney Island Cyclone. But you know what? A lot of rides back in this era, they did share a lot of similarities with that ride. So I'm not going to knock him. But number 23, Mike Boodley. Mike Boodley is a pretty interesting story. So Mike Boodley, as you can probably tell by his list of coaster accomplishments, the original Gwazi in Tampa, the original Wildcat at Hershey, both of the Roars, the one that has been converted and the one that is not, Outlaw Adventureland, and Thunderhead, which to this very day I still think may have a claim to being one of the best, certainly one of the top 5 best wooden roller coasters in the United States of America. And I would take anybody to task on that, and maybe even top 3. Thunderhead is simply that good. Now, he does have a list of others as well, but these are the most notable. And Mike Boodley worked for CCI and then GCI. And yeah, so good deal, Mike Boodley. Number 22, Jeff Pike. Now, Jeff has kind of worked a little bit everywhere, but the majority of his design career got started working with GCI. And he has an amazing list of credentials, including Gold Striker, Mystic Timbers, Renegade, Invader, and Prowler. Now, the interesting thing with Invader is it is with his new position at Skyline Attractions. And when you see the GCI family coasters or a GCI coaster in general, and it says featuring a layout designed by Skyline Attractions, that's Jeff Pike. And I don't exactly know what the contractual obligations there are, if it is an exclusive contract, for Jeff to solely be designing for GCI at this point. I don't know. But Jeff, great catalog, man. Keep it up. Moving on to number 21, Larry Bill. Now, Larry, also an interesting story, like Mike Boodley. He was part of the original CCI team, and even goes back to the Charles Dinn days and the Curtis D. Summers days. So Larry has a pretty interesting catalog as well, to include Boss, Boulder Dash, Excalibur at Funtown Splashtown, USA, Ghost Rider, and not just Raven, but also Legend at Holiday World. So Larry has built and designed some absolute bangers in the wooden roller coaster category, and I would expect guys like Larry and Jeff Pike and Mike Boodley, these guys to be crawling up these rankings as time goes on and these coasters become more and more iconic. Moving on to number 20, Denise Dinn. And now, Denise, not really a designer and obviously not hands-on in the construction process, but what Denise Dinn Larrick is a solid manager and a solid project manager, an overseer of projects and the company that she is working for. So, Denise had a huge part in her father's company at Dinn Corporation, and when that ended up dissolving, she was at CCI, and when CCI finally had closed up shop and they had, wrapped things up as a company themselves, as people were splitting and going their own ways, Denise had actually been hired by S&S Sansei to bring a new wooden roller coaster division there. And they had mild success, sold 4 wooden roller coasters, but that was it. Next, at number 19, Fred Grubb. And Fred, his case is super interesting, and I think it was really brought to prominence by the guys at Coaster Studios. And I really think that Taylor did a great job working on that entire documentary. I think that it really brought to the forefront the genius that was Fred Grubb, to be able to innovate this new way to not just preserve a wooden roller coaster, but take a ride that had lost its popularity, had lost its comfort, and turn it into a brand new attraction at fractions of the cost for the park of building a brand new ground up attraction. So, pretty crazy. But moving on, number 18, John Wardley. Now, I have him listed with his credential as, in air quotes, being an Imagineer for Merlin. And I use that term incredibly loosely. John Wardley is notoriously known for the work that he did at Alton Towers. He pretty much dreams the dream and then finds a way to make that dream reality. And, John has a reputation in the industry as somebody who will not just push the limits, but create new boundaries. And I think that's why Alton Towers is still so widely regarded as being such a phenomenal roller coaster park, is because every single one of their rides is unique because of the height restrictions. They have to be creative. And that's John Wardley. Moving on to number 17, Jim Say. Now, Jim is the founder and the president and originally the lead designer for Premier Rides. And he can be attributed to the conversion of Powder Keg, also Joker's Jinx, a couple of those models, the Mr. Freeze models, Flight of Fear, Skyrocket. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Truth be told, I'm not 100% certain as to what responsibilities Jim is still carrying today in terms of design. I would have to assume that there is an entire team below him that is doing the vast majority of the design work nowadays for the newer roller coasters. But I know in the beginning and in the early stages of the company, Jim was the guy. And now I know that there was also a lot of consulting that was done through Bureau Stengel, but nonetheless, Jim was part of making those happen. Now, if you've enjoyed the video so far, guys, please consider dropping a like for the video and subscribe to the channel now. It really goes a long way to help the channel grow. Now, moving on to number 15 and 16, we're going to kind of jam these two together, and that's going to be Walter Bolliger and Claude Mabillard. Now, I don't think we need to get too deep into why these guys are on this list. They are the co-founders of B&M, formerly two engineers at Giovanola. They did a lot of subcontracting work for Intamin, and they took a lot of what they had learned and made some adjustments through their engineering prowess to be able to, construct a whole bunch of rides. They introduced in 1992 the world's first inverted roller coaster, and the Batman the ride ended up being cloned, I don't know, a dozen times. Big deal. Number 14, Dana Morgan. Now, Dana he is a pretty interesting guy. One of my favorite guys on the list, actually. One of the people that I personally find to be the most intriguing, just of how he came up in the industry, being Ed Morgan's son, and being around aerodynamics through so many different iterations and leading the company through different mergers and acquisitions, and then eventually D.H. Morgan, and then selling his roller coaster catalog and that division to Chance Rides. And there's just so much of interest to the Dana Morgan story. And if you get an opportunity, go watch some of the interviews that you can find on the internet. Truly a fascinating guy. And you know what? After I watched the interview, I gotta admit, I felt about 3% more intelligent. Dana just has that ability to be able to raise your IQ through a conversation, even when he's the only one speaking. Moving on to number 13, Curtis D. Summers. Now, Curtis D. Summers has a pretty extensive catalog, and he worked with some pretty famous designers, several that are on this list. Now, his catalog, and the most notables of American Eagle, Wolverine Wildcat, Predator, Timberwolf, and Thunder Run, they all have one thing in common, well, except for American Eagle, that is, and the majority of these, they were Charles Dinn built roller coasters from the Dinn Corporation. So Curtis D. Summers, he had a great deal of experience with his design team, working with Charles Dinn once the Curtis D. Summers design group ended up dissolving. And then a short period of time after that, the Dinn Corporation ended up dissolving, which, ended up leading to CCI, and from CCI, we ended up getting GCI and Gravity Group out of the deal. So Curtis D. Summers, really important dude. Moving on to number 12, William L. Cobb. Now, William, he has a pretty cool laundry list as well in terms of coasters. So he was the designer for the infamous Judge Roy Scream, also for Screamin' Eagle, also for the Great American Scream Machine, Tornado out at Adventureland, and Monster at La Ronde. And, William Cobb, sometimes he is another designer that can take a little bit of heat and criticism for utilizing so many of the design characteristics of the Coney Island Cyclone in several of his rides. But I gotta be honest, I don't necessarily see that. In riding the rides myself, I happen to think that his layouts were pretty darn good for their day. And, even if you just did a little bit of reprofiling on some of the hills now, I think they would all be bangers still. Moving on, though, to number 11, Lamarcus Adna Thompson. Lamarcus Adna Thompson is a pretty unique character. Now, he was a businessman and an inventor back in the late 1800s. And in 1884 at Coney Island, he opened the Gravity Switchback Railway. And his intentions when he had opened this Gravity Switchback Railway was that he was trying to get people out of the bars and out of the brothels, which is a pretty amazing reason to try to create something fun outdoors, to try and get humanity out of the gutter, if you will. And then he ended up having success with it, and more people wanted to be able to share these types of experiences. And then the Scenic Railway was built in Atlantic City in 1887. Him and his company would go on to operate and build several of these over the next couple decades, but he is accredited with being the father of the modern day roller coaster. Pretty important guy. Number 10, Ed Morgan. Now, we talked about Dana Morgan already, which means that I think by default I kind of had to put Ed, his father, a little bit higher on the list, but I will be honest, I was conflicted with this decision. But the more that I thought about it, obviously when we think of aero development, aerodynamics, aero hoos, whichever version you want to remember, you think of two people. Really, you think of Ron Toomer and you think of Ed Morgan, the two founders. And eventually, later on, you think of Dana, due to his position as president later on in life of Aero. But Ed, he really was the brains on the ground for the actual hands-on mechanics that were building these rides. Keep in mind, they did not have AutoCAD. So a lot of these pipes and tubes, they were bent on site. Ed was the mastermind behind that part of the work. Moving on to number 9, Charles Dinn. Now, Charles, we obviously know, infamously used to work for Kings Island as the director of parks maintenance and what have you. He would go on later on to be the person attributed as the main builder and designer for the Beast. And, the story of how the Beast was built is pretty cool because they essentially just started building. And they really didn't know where or how or what it was going to do or where it was going to go. They just knew that they were building. And I think it ended up turning out pretty well. For not really having any solid etched in stone plans, just a great idea and some basics. I think they ended up turning out one of the most iconic roller coasters in the history of the world. Obviously, he would go on to find the Dinn Corporation, and that eventually, too, would fold. But number 8, Herbert P. Schmeck. Herbert P. Schmeck has a pretty awesome little catalog. Now, he has 2 comets on the list. The first comet being at Hershey Park. The second comet actually being at Waldameer, also an ACE historic landmark. Additionally, Rollercoaster, which in my heart is incredibly important because it was my very first roller coaster credit. Then Thunderhawk at Dorney Park, which had just celebrated its 100-year anniversary. and Wildcat at Lake Compounce, which recently got some Gravity Group pre-cut prefab retrack work. And it is significantly better. I can't wait for them to retrack the last portion of the ride, because then Lake Compounce is going to have a second banger on their hands. So Herbert P. Schmeck, phenomenal designer, great impact on the industry for his era and his time. Moving on to number 7, Edward A. Vettel. Now, being a Pittsburgher, when I hear Edward Vettel, I immediately think of roller coasters. This is a name that for me is synonymous with the craft. He is notoriously known for being one of John A. Miller's most stiff competition during the late 19 teens and the late 1920s, or early to late 1920s. So as John Miller was building up Kennywood, Edward Vettel was hired away from Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio, where he had helped and aided in the construction of multiple roller coasters, and he was brought to Westview Park. And then the owners of Westview Park realized the talent that Edward Vettel had, and they started selling roller coasters all over the world. He was responsible for the Dips, Blue Streak at Conneaut Lake, and Cyclone at Lakeside Park in Colorado. Number 6, Alan Schilke. Now this guy is definitely, as time goes on, going to continue moving up this list. Alan Schilke, all rights given, on some people's list could very well be number 1. And although I don't agree with that, I don't necessarily think that that I could hate on it, because he's probably deserving under the right circumstances. And it really depends on how you value and you rate these folks, and the caliber and the quality and the quantity. And, you know, it kind of depends on your idea as to what makes people great. And for Alan, I don't think it matters which category, because he's great in everything. When you have an all-star cast like Iron Gwazi, Zadra, Egenika, X2, and Steel Vengeance in your catalog, as well as another 35 plus, something's right. Number 5, Ron Toomer. Now, Ron, I did have to put ahead of Alan Schilke, and I think the reasoning is pretty obvious. Ron was ahead of his time, and he just had a special knack for creating monsters that people wanted to experience. And there was a time where every new record-breaking coaster, they were all being made by Aerodynamics. It got to a point that Aero actually was the first roller coaster manufacturer to start entering into contractual stipulations with parks, as to they won't build a ride taller for the next XYZ amount of years, or it can't be within this many miles, or it can't be in this country. There were building stipulations as to what records could be sought after. Very interesting stuff. Moving on. Number 4, John C. Allen. Now, without John C. Allen, maybe the roller coaster industry dies. Maybe somewhere in the 60s, in the early 70s, by the late 70s, and assuredly by the early 80s, if things didn't change in the industry, if there weren't excitement and new innovation, the roller coaster and the theme park industry, it may have went downhill to the point of collapse, never to return again. Now, obviously, I would like to think that that's not true, and that we would have found a way to muscle through, because, yay, we're enthusiasts. But you know what? I don't think the internet existed before, and people weren't encouraging travel to different parts of the country just to go and ride amusement attractions. So if you weren't drawing a local audience, you were kind of dead in the water. Enter John C. Allen. So when he designed the Racer, it changed everything. And the rest of his accomplishments, pretty notorious as well. Number 3, Anton Schwarzkopf. Now, Anton Schwarzkopf, the developer and designer for rides like Colossus the Fire Dragon, Riddler Mindbender, New Revolution, Shockwave, The Wizard, I mean, and the list just goes on and on. I think at this point in time, with the closure of Scorpion at Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay, maybe the Schwarzkopf name is in people's mouths a little bit more. Also, we had the All-American Triple Loop this year open at Indiana Beach. And after some complaints with the ride's restraints, those have been adjusted and corrected as well to try and return it to as crisp and clean and smooth as a ride as humanly possible, and I can attest, mission accomplished. So, you know, Schwarzkopf, his rides are known all over the world, and he's one of the most influential men. You can't argue that at all. Number 2, Werner Stengel. Now, if you have a top 5 of rides that you have designed that includes El Toro, Maverick, Montu, King Dakar, and Millennium Force, I think that should just wrap up the conversation. They should give you some type of trophy and memorialize you in some way, perhaps a plaque, hire some type of sculptor, make a clay statue. I don't know, but Werner Stengel, he deserves all of that shit and more. And typically, I'm not a big guy to be cursing and swearing, but damn is Werner Stengel the man. He is so much the man that there is an element that he created that is named after him called the Stengel Dive. And, you know, I mean, look, the rides that this guy has designed throughout the course of his career is in the hundreds, and so many bangers in the list from top to bottom. But number 1, John A. Miller. By far, in my opinion, for my money, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, John A. Miller is the most influential man that has ever worked on, built, or designed a roller coaster for one simple fact. And that is the patent, the creation, the development of the upstop wheel. With an amazing list of top coasters like Classic Coaster at the Washington State Fair, Jackrabbit at Kennywood, Jackrabbit at Seabreeze, Legend at Arnold Park in Iowa, and Rollercoaster, of course, at Lagoon in Utah. Some of the most memorable and most classic wooden roller coaster experiences in the world are from John A. Miller. And to think that most of these rides were built in the 1918, 1919, 1920, all the way up to 1930, it is remarkable to think. Now, again, I talked at the intro about how we're so blessed to have so many amazing rides. But I think it's important for us to remember that we're also so blessed to have so many amazing designers, so many amazing builders, people that are committed to making sure that when you and I and our family and friends, we show up at a park on a Friday or Saturday during the fall season this year, that we're not only riding something that is safe, but it's a work of art. Because you see, to these people, to the designers, the builders, the engineers, the mechanics, this is their canvas. And every wooden plank, every steel tube piece of track, it's the paintbrush and the paint. And they're trying to express themselves to an audience the same way that an artist would. They want us to walk away loving their masterpiece. And for as blessed as we are to have so many rides, I want us just to remember for a minute all the amazing people that bring us through the finish line. That's going to do it for us today. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to comment below. Let me know what you think of my rankings. What are your rankings? And like I said, maybe check out one of these videos that you see here. Like this Hershey Park video up on the top left. Also, please check out some of our Worst to First series ranking roller coasters. We have about 30 plus parks that we've done reviews on, so check those out now. That's going to do it for now. Till next time, guys. We'll see you out there.